from a European lens, looking at other world music. Did you challenge them at all on that? And what kind, like your instructors or professors at the university? Because it's kind of interesting, you know, how ethnomusicology and how they're supposed to be almost like an anthropologist, you know, looking at world music, and yet they're not appreciating those processes. So what was the dialogue around that when you were in university?
Yeah, it was an interesting time because, you know, my final project, I was doing work on Salish music, and there's really nothing written about Salish music. Like, it seems like everywhere else in North America, they have some kind of documentation of, you know, their music, and, you know, a lot of it's written down. But yeah, no, I guess our area was so isolated, and in the 19th century, they thought, you know, we were all going to die off anyway, and like we were the dying race kind of thing. But yeah, so like I thought, well, you know, I know all this information from my mom, you know, but also like learning from Lee Miracle, who's another Salish, you know, teacher. She you know, taught a lot about music as well, and Jeanette Armstrong is another teacher that I've, you know, listened to, and so all women actually, all these strong Salish women, and so, you know, I cited them, like, and, you know, I, you know, wrote out my final paper, and my teacher, you know, I handed it in, you know, like a few weeks before the deadline, just to kind of get some input. And my teacher said, well, you know, where's your citations? Like, where's, you know, I said, well, there are no citations. I said, there's one little reference in like a Francis Densmore book. And he goes, well, you know, that's where you have to go to. That's, you know, that's what you have to cite. That's what, you know, even if you disagree with her, you got to, you know, write that in. And so I did that. But like, you know, I did argue saying, well, you know, nobody has written, and this, you know, the first time, I mean, there are probably, you know, some other papers about it, but I thought, well, you know, I'm Salish, you know, I've learned this, and so like I'm passing on, you know, this learning, or trying to anyway. And, you know, I'll write it, and, you know, if it does get published, then, you know, at least it's there, and if people want to argue with me, they can, and I welcome that. It's like I want to learn, you know, as much as I can about Salish music, and an anthropologist from the United States has a lot more power, and, you know, than my mom, who learned the songs from her aunts and grandmothers, and so, but yeah, it's slowly changing.
What kind of protocols and processes do you have in place around copyright and ownership and those types of things, which I always find really interesting when there's a merging of contemporary and traditionally rooted music and songs?
Yeah, no, that is something that we have to deal with a lot. Not so much a long time ago, but yeah, these days there's become a focus on this issue, and it is a good issue to really look at in terms of collective copyright, because, you know, what is owned by a community is not usually recognized by international law, and so there's a lot of things happening on that front in different arenas, and but yeah, like. I don't record any songs that, you know, I know that are ceremonial, or that I, you know, have not a very good idea where it comes from. But like all the songs that my mom taught me, like she said, you know, share these songs, and she learned them back in the 1930s and 40s, and it was a time when, you know, the music was underground, like people were afraid to sing these songs in public, and, you know, they had good cause because they could be arrested and thrown in jail for it. Our kids don't know these songs, you know. We have to share them, you know, share them with your kids, and, you know, get this music out there before we, lose it all. And they recognize that at that time. And so anything that she's taught me, I do share. And I know some people in the community, talk about certain songs, but for me, it's my mom is my elder, and she told me to share. So that's what I'm doing, which is. Yeah, you're taking from the music, but you're not taking the whole song or something. It's just the idea or the feeling from that song and how that works out. And so yeah, that's what I mostly do. But yeah, there are times where I take traditional songs and literally, change a few things here and there, but add different chords or, kind of just because I love the song so much, and I think it fits in a contemporary arena. I know there's always going to be the idea of copyright, which is I think is a good thing to really address and really get a hold on.
And I imagine an ethnomusicologist or someone in the whole Western world, they're starting to understand the collective ownership and the importance of the history and honoring a bit more and respecting where those songs are from. But it's kind of interesting just hearing that, and how someone who works with traditional compositions and how the Western world, and because I've seen a lot of traditional music being recorded by non-Indigenous people and copyrighted, and it's not a language that we understand in our communities. Maybe you could talk a bit about some of the projects that you've worked on over the years. I know you've worked on some fairly large ones and small ones, and talk about how that's been. What was it like for your very first big project? And it must have been kind of scary.
Memory is not my friend these days. One of the first things I remember was getting an 8-track recorder. It's wow, I can actually multi-track my voice. I can layer my voice, and so that was one of the first things I did. Is I created a song, and I just had all these different harmonies and drones, and it was more of an experiment, and it was just really fun to know the multi-track system. And I played it for a friend of mine, and she's always, I gotta use this, and I go, oh, okay. There's a piece called, I think it's The Tree of Consumption. So she, had text, and she had this big tree dress on, and there's video images, and then she played the music in the background, and it was a really powerful performance. But yeah, it's I look back and I was I think, I could have done better with with the composition, or I could have done better with the production. But at the time, it was just it was so fun to multi-track. But yeah, so that kind of pushed me more into multi-tracking and layering, and but yeah, understanding what directors get attached to. But lately, I've done a lot of work with choreographers. They commissioned me to write a music piece. But this last year, I switched that around. So I compose a piece or produce a piece, and then I commission a choreographer to choreograph to that piece and film it. And so at the Native Education College where I work at, that's what I did. I got a grant, and we did it's called a digital longhouse, and basically showing different things that happen in a West Coast longhouse. I also lead the singing group at the college, which is traditionally based, but we collectively put things together, and so I kind of facilitate a collective composition. And one of the compositions was called "Come Back to Me, My Spirit," and actually my mom played a big hand in coming up with the words and the idea. But over the years we collaborated with taiko groups, like a Japanese drum group. We recorded it, and we put the taiko drums in there, and then we thought that the logical step would be to have an Aboriginal choreographer and a Japanese choreographer work together. And so that's what I did. Is I commissioned Michelle Olson, and Jay Hirabayashi. But like, yeah, it's coming from that music. Yeah, from that music perspective, it's like, okay, I got the music. Now here, dance, which is an interesting process. It was like a really fun process too. It's like, I like doing this.